Welcome back to another Live Each Day with Purpose podcast. I am so excited. I have a special guest. His name is Jason Mack. Let me tell you about him. He is a director, writer, and actor. A Father's Legacy is his new movie, and it is his feature film directorial debut. He began storytelling as an actor in Atlanta and on shows such as Vampire Diaries, Castle, and Criminal Minds, among others. After moving to Los Angeles, he knows actors were a single piece of the greater puzzle. Jason began looking for and creating projects to be more involved in the entire process, calling this his film school. Jason directed numerous shorts, which played at festivals across the country, such as the Los Angeles International Shorts Festival. The shorts varied in length and tested and honed his filmmaking skills. From there, he knew it was time to make the jump to features. Enter A Father's Legacy, which we will be talking about on this episode. Welcome, Jason. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us your story. Have you always wanted to be a storyteller?
So I remember when I was young that I was an athlete, right? So I played tennis. I played tennis for a couple of years in college. And when I was younger, like in high school, I was like, I want to be a professional tennis player. And then you get to 16 or 17 and you're like, well, I'm not good enough. No matter how much I may want this, I am never going to be a successful professional tennis player. But I remember looking back and how I was impacted by film and TV stories. And it would allow me to kind of feel these emotions that I didn't necessarily feel in everyday life, or allow me access to that. Because, as a young man growing up in the South, especially, I guess like 20 years ago, we're getting older. But growing up, it was like, there's certain emotions that you maybe weren't really supposed to show other people or to feel. You didn't want to come across as sensitive, or you didn't want to come across as vulnerable, because that could be weak, right? And so and I didn't know that then. So looking back on that, stories had a big impact on me. So I go to college, I'm playing tennis there. I graduate and I become a sales director for a microbrewery. So I'm going up and down the East Coast selling beer for RJ Rockers. I was like, hey, if you can have a beer with me, you'll probably buy the product. And it was cool, right? It was fun. It's probably most people's 20-somethings dream job. Mm-hmm. And I did it for a few years. I had wonderful bosses who taught me what it is to really care about their employees, and they cared about me. But after a few years, I was like, is this what I want to be doing in another 5 years, in another 10 years? And I was like, I don't think so. It's what does my soul yearn to do? And I was like, I'm so impacted by stories that I see in film. Sometimes it's educational. Sometimes it's just to escape and laugh a whole bunch with a bunch of strangers in a dark theater. Mm-hmm. Or maybe it's an action movie or whatever, or social issue. And for TV shows, you get invested in these characters. I was like, I want to be a part of those stories. So I started going to auditions anywhere I could drive in the Southeast, really, and just to get experience, because I didn't know what I was doing. I had never done theater. I think I wanted to do theater, but I was a little bit scared. And I was like, well, I'm an athlete. I'm training for my sport, so I don't really have the time to commit to the rehearsals. And realistically, I was probably scared, right? I was like, I'm gonna get up there, I'm gonna forget my lines. How do they remember their lines? There's so many lines. Mm-hmm. And I started going to these auditions. I would book stuff every now and then. So I go shoot stuff on the weekends and some bad stuff. It didn't matter. I didn't care. And then I booked this movie in Atlanta, and it was a super low budget movie, but it was going to be for 2 weeks. And that's where my interest really was. And I had some wonderful bosses. I remember they pulled me in and they were like, hey, what do you want to do? We want to help you be as successful as we can in whatever you want to do, whether that's here or somewhere else. And I really appreciated that they noticed that in me, and they gave me an opportunity to kind of make that decision with them. And I was like, yeah, I want to go do this thing. So I left my job. I sold all my stuff. I owned a townhouse at the time, and I sold all my stuff in the townhouse for like, I think it was like 7 grand or something cash. I was like, let's bankroll it. So literally silverware, bed, bedding. I didn't really take it. TV, couch,
Wow.
cash, boom. So I went and did the movie, and I moved back home for like 2 years. Not 2 years, like a year, to Sumter, South Carolina. So here I am, mid-20s, moving back home, and didn't see that coming. But essentially, I had a sleeping bag in the back of my car, and I would go anywhere I could in the Southeast to act in anything. And I didn't know where I was going to stay when I would go. I would just hope, I'm like, man, I hope somebody on the production or crew or cast has like a couch or a floor or something. And I would sleep there, and just to gain experience. And most of the stuff I did was just awful. I mean, it, it really was like, it wasn't good. And I knew it wasn't going to be good, but I didn't have it. I didn't know what I was doing. So I had to learn. Um, and then after about a year of that, I got an agent in Atlanta, and I moved there, which is a great place. They shoot a lot of stuff there. It's a great place to get experience, especially with smaller roles. And my first role was Vampire Diaries. And I remember that it was so cool. It's like, that's a huge show,
Uh-huh.
and their audience following is huge. And I have, what's funny is I'll talk to people and they're like, my daughters watch that show. You know, it's like teenage girls love that show.
Mhm.
And I remember getting it. It felt really good to get like a real, it wasn't some small production, but it was like millions of people are going to see this. And I remember being so nervous on set. But so I did a couple of gigs, or a few gigs in Atlanta like that. And I remember it was about the 2 year mark. I was on set for, it was a J.J. Abrams show at the time, who, it was called Revolution. It's where like the lights go out. What happens if the lights go out? There's like a power source or something. I don't know. So I'm in Wilmington, North Carolina. I think we're on like one of the university campuses. Wonderful energy. And I remember one of the lead actresses, I was speaking with her, and she'd been in the business for a long time. And she was so grateful to be there. And I was like, oh, wow, how cool is it to have a conversation with somebody who's just like, like they're still excited to be here. But I remember sitting there looking around at all the energy and the excitement. And I was like, I'm in like my get up, which was some weird, I was like a guard or something. I don't know. But I remember thinking, I'm pretty creatively unsatisfied.
Mm.
I was like, I have this small role. Like realistically, if you go and grab, like, if you go refill your drink in the kitchen, you're probably gonna miss my role. And I was like, it's time to go. I've got to go to LA, where for me, that's where I was going to become a bigger part of stories and become a big, because I want to impact people,
Yeah.
right? Like I want my characters or whatever I'm doing to have an impact. And I moved to LA and got a few more roles, but ultimately I wasn't working as much as I wanted. So I started, I always kind of felt like I wanted to direct, because I'm probably got like a little bit of control freak in me. Like I love to consult. You can ask my wife. She's like, you love to consult. I love to give my opinion. Um, so I love to answer questions. So as a director, that's pretty much all you do.
Mm.
But I was thinking in my delusional mind that one day I was going to get my show, a TV show, and on like the 3rd season, I'd be like, hey, I want to direct a couple episodes. And I was like, well, that TV show might not come. And if I keep waiting for permission, I could be waiting a really, really long time. And I started doing shorts. And my first short was like a little 2-page script that I wrote from a story that I saw on Facebook. And I made it. And then I made another one that was a little bit longer, another one that was a little bit longer. And that was my film school. That's how I really learned how to plan a shoot. And, as an actor, I had that advantage because I knew how I liked for people to direct me.
Mhm.
And so that's what I did with other actors. I'm like, I'm assuming that they like to actually be directed. Um, and for the most part, I think they do. But yeah, and that all kind of led to where we're at now. Is I got to the point to where it was time to do a feature. because shorts are cool, but to me, it's film school. It's just learning. You can't make any money on shorts. Maybe you can use them as part of like a bigger pitch, but it's like, to me, it's a learning process.
Mhm.
And that's where you're probably going to ask this question, but now I'm kind of leading into like how a father's legacy came about.
No, yeah, that's next question. It's a good
And
bet.
it kind of goes right in there. I'm just going to keep training it. About that time, I knew that in my career, I was like, I want to make a feature.
Mhm.
And I knew that I had to make it in a way that no one could say no. So it didn't matter if we had $1,000, $10,000, 100,000, or 100 million. It was like, I can't wait on permission. I need to do it in locations that I control, with a budget that I can do the story no matter what. And we'll just beg, borrow, and not steal, but favors, tons of favors.
Good.
But at that time, my father passed away unexpectedly.
Mm.
And I remember that because I was in LA, and my father had some gone through some surgeries for like, some heart stuff, and things had gone well, but then like something didn't go well, and he was back in the hospital. And I remember my mom calling and just kind of telling me the story, and I was like, do I need to come home?
Mm.
And because I had asked that before, and we were like, no, because it was around Christmas time, so I was already planning on coming home like less than a week later.
Right.
But I was like, do I need to come home? And she didn't really respond, and I was like, cool, I'm coming home. And so the next day I was on a plane, and so I get there, and ultimately, like, there were some complications in surgery, and he had a stroke. And so when that happens, you don't know necessarily what the damage is until a little bit later. So we're planning on, okay, like, little turn of events. We might have to look into like some rehab facilities and stuff like that. And that was our mindset for a few days. And then it just took a turn, and it was like, there, like, he's not coming out of it.
Mm.
And so I'm so grateful as a family that we were able to say goodbye and be with him as he passed, because not everyone gets that opportunity. And I remember being outside the hospital room with the ICU nurse and talking to her, and she was so wonderful, and she was so caring, and I mean, everyone was there were beautiful human beings there in that process. But I remember talking to her and being like, I feel like my DNA is changing. I feel like something inside of me is shifting. And that was very much a before and an after moment with me. There was before, when I had my father walking on this earth, and there was after, when he was no longer here. And for me in Los Angeles, that's where I was living. It's not like my day to day was affected.
Mhm.
It's not like I was going and having family dinners every Tuesday night. There was literally one person that I couldn't call. But that person was one of my earthly protectors, one of my earthly guardians. Like, and he probably would have preferred that I tried to be a banker. I do have a degree in finance. So it's like, for you to tell an older Southern dad that you're going to move to Los Angeles to be an actor is, is not necessarily something they want to hear.
Mhm.
But he always supported me, and he always loved me no matter what. And I knew that no matter what happened, I could call him, and he would be there to support me and do whatever he could. And I remember hearing stories from people after he passed of being like, oh, your dad was so proud of you. And when you were on TV, like, he'd be telling everyone, like, tune into the episode. And it was like, and I knew he was, but just to hear that, like,
Mhm.
it really meant a lot. And so through that process of kind of dealing with his passing, I really started exploring that father-son relationship. Like, why did it mean so much to me? Not just my own, but when I would see that story in movies or TV, like, it always kind of really got me. Like, I love a good father-son story.
Mhm.
And so, like, why is that personally? Like, why is that? And so I started developing that kind of thought of that questioning. What is a father to a son? And what is a son to a father?
Mm.
And that's the root of a father's legacy. And then I created a fictional story around those thoughts of being like, how can I explore this topic and this meaning of this relationship through a story that I think will be entertaining. And we actually shot it at my family's pond house. Yeah, in Sumter, South Carolina, right? Because I told you, I was like, look, I have to do something that no one can say no to. Because now it wasn't just about my career, it wasn't just about creating something, it was about like, well, now when I wrote that script and worked on it, did table reads and worked it and was like, I think this is actually really good. I want to make this. Now it made it even more important that no one could say no, because I mean, this is essentially my love letter to my father. So I was like, I got to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did it with locations that I had access to, and tons of favors. Like no one involved with this movie got paid what they should have been paid, but they believed in the story. Somehow they believed in me. And we all came together and we made this story. And to the journey, we shot this in 2018. It's 3 years later now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like this was like some magical, like, boom, poof. It's like, no, it's been like this excruciatingly long, like super labor filled process. But that is a super long answer to your question of, did I always know I was going to be a storyteller? I think deep down, I always wanted to be. And I guess now I am.
What do you think your dad would think of the movie?
Oh, he would love it. My dad was like this ham bone. And it was funny because he's very extroverted and my mom is very introverted. So my dad would always go, he's so social. I feel like he like knew everyone. And I remember when I moved back home, and I call that time in my life my free internship, because I was living at home, driving around, just doing whatever I could for a Subway sandwich. And uh, I needed to do, or I wanted to do like this little project to help me get like my SAG card or whatever. I thought it was really important at the time, and it wasn't, but when you're young. So we put together this little production, and we actually shot it at my church back in Sumter, Trinity, and Trinity United Methodist. And I would get like some local kids and some like local folks like be in the background and stuff like that. And I really didn't know what I was doing. I guess technically that was my first directing job. Although I feel kind of bad, we never finished it. It was just, it probably wasn't really that good. But you live and you learn. But I remember I put my dad in a scene, and one of the characters or whatever was like poisoning people. So I was like, Dad, you're gonna drink this, and you're gonna be like, like you're gonna be choking or whatever. And I remember he was such a ham. And at the time, I felt like he looked like an older Harrison Ford. So I think it's really interesting that we're like, I don't know, 11, 12 years later. And we actually shot one of the scenes in the movie, a couple scenes in the movie, we actually shot at Trinity United Methodist Church, right? So there's a little full circle moment there. But I made the movie. There's a picture at the end of the film is dedicated to my dad. And there he is. He's holding a fish at the pond that we shot at. And so I just like, and I've been talking to my mom a lot lately, and it's just, this movie's going to come out in like 700 theaters for one night only event. And I'm like, he's looking down and he's going to see this. And it's like, he's such a ham bone. And I'm like, Mom, I get a kick that his picture is going to be in like 700 theaters. I don't know how many people are going to see this or see it at home or whatever, but I just like, I get a big kick out of that.
That is so neat. And it's also, I mean, it's coming out, isn't it, around like Father's Day weekend?
Yeah, it's coming out like the Thursday before Father's Day. And so it's really cool. Like I'm very fortunate to, I mean, I don't know how much your viewers care about kind of behind the scenes of the movie making process,
Sure.
but distribution is, I mean, it may be the worst part of it. It
Mm-hmm.
may be the worst part of it because you've like finished this movie And now you're trying to figure out a way to get people to see it. Potentially it is a business. Like, you are trying to, like, get money back and like pay for the movie. And usually that comes from people seeing it. And we went through so many deals that we ended up like kind of getting pretty deep in and not going with them. And then we ended up with our current partner, who they just seem to get the movie. They get the movie and what it is. And they were like, we need to release this near Father's Day. And so, like, they understand it's not just like, cool, we got it. All right, let's throw it out there. Let's throw it out there. And so it's really neat. There's like, we partnered with a company who, did, or not a company, but an organization who did like a devotional. And so it's like, it's really cool seeing this stuff built around it. And what's interesting is I'm going to answer all of your questions before you ask them, potentially. So
Okay. Like keeping track.
we, I feel like I'm taking your podcast away from you. Is because there is a little faith message in here. Mm-hmm. And people ask, like, well, it's a little bit grittier, or it's a little bit rougher around the edges than like the characters are a bit more flawed, and it's a little bit grittier than like a standard faith film. Was that intentional? And it's kind of like yes and no, because and I can't really claim that someone else said it, but it was like, I didn't want to make a Sunday morning Christian film when everyone's on their best behavior, they're in church, they're like, speaking all nice and singing and clean and good. It's like, I want to make like a Thursday night Christian film, where it's like we're deep in the week, we're stressed, we're just trying to keep our heads above water. And I really wanted to me, share a grounded, real experience, and being like, listen, we each have our own individual walk, and mine's not perfect. Realistically, yours isn't either. And most people's aren't. And it's just, I feel like if I struggle, like, we open the film with an old man saying, I don't even know if you're listening. I don't know if you're out there. And if we're being honest, we've all felt that way at some point. Mm-hmm. Like, am I being heard? And deeper for these guys in the movie of like, am I worthy of being loved? Because I've made some mistakes. Am I worthy to be loved? And then you convince yourself that you're not. And that's the biggest lie, right? And that's like, then we're filled with shame, and then we shove it down, and we're like, well, I can't share this with anyone because I'm gonna look weak. And really, vulnerability is the opposite of that. It's owning your mistakes and being honest and open with it. That doesn't mean you're let off the hook. You still got to answer for it. Right. But I don't even know how I got on that tangent. But yeah, I just wanted to tell a real story with what I thought were real people.
Yeah. And I like what you said about vulnerability, because I do think that in our culture, vulnerability is oftentimes shunned. And, people are almost like silenced, or, oh, they're sharing that, or they're sharing too much. And why would they want anyone to know that? But I mean, in scripture even calls us to not only carry each other's burdens, but to share our own, so that people that have gone through something similar know that they're not alone and they know how to get through it. And so we do have to be vulnerable. And I think the more people are vulnerable, and the more people that share their story and the realness and the rawness of it, I think it then allows other people to feel safe, where they can also share theirs without judgment, without feeling criticism, without feeling shame. And I think we kind of do need to work on changing that narrative.
For sure.
So, okay. So why is, and I think this is a crucial, critical issue just within the world, a father-son relationship. I mean, we see so much havoc within the world of there not being even a father role model, whether it's a relationship with a daughter or whether it's a relationship with a son. But why is that relationship so crucial? Like, why is it so necessary within this world?
I think, and these are just my personal views, is I think it's really about having someone who's walked the path before you, helping guide you through it, right? So it's like they've made mistakes, and hopefully they're steering you away from those mistakes. or they've had successes, and hopefully they're, helping to set you up for success. And I think like it's incredibly important to, yes, have a father, but also a lot of people don't, for whatever reason. Maybe they passed tragically, or maybe they just weren't there. Um, but I think that's why like coaches are important.
Mhm.
I think mentors are important, whether it's like a youth director, or a teacher at a school, at like, for the newspaper club. There's so many places where you can have an impact on young people. And for me, like coming from sports, I had so many coaches who were very much like father figures.
Mhm.
And I don't even know if they realized it, because they were focused on the physical aspects of like pushing me to, take care of my body, get my body stronger, get fitter, or work on this skill, and teach me discipline, and teach me about having goals and doing what's necessary to reach those goals. And without those coaches, I don't know if I would be where I am today. And so it's not just a matter of a biological father, which I'm privileged, I'm honored to have had one, and had one who loved me. But I think there's like, I mean, and I'm not an expert, but I was looking up like some statistics and stuff like that of like fatherless homes, and it's like people who come from fatherless homes, they're 4 times more likely to be in poverty. There's one statistic, I don't even know if I believe it because it sounds so insane, but it's 75% of long-term correctional facility inmates are from fatherless homes.
That wouldn't surprise me.
And I'm like, that's insane.
Mhm.
And I do, like, I'm like, wow, I could totally see that, because you didn't have someone being like, yes, no. And I can only speak from the male perspective, as having, that's what I grew up with. But I mean, I still have people, older men in my life, who I look up to, who their word means a lot in what they say, because I appreciate that they've been there. And I hope that as I get older, I hopefully have something of value to offer to younger people. Um, so yeah, there's a line in the movie from The Old Man. It's like, sometimes the only thing to do is just to be there. And I think that's it.
Mhm.
Right? I think we're always trying to look for, especially in today's culture, the perfect picture, the perfect meal, the perfect outfit, the perfect thing to say. I think sometimes just you got to be there, have the good intentions, be there with love, and do the best you can. And that's what's going to make the impact.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I definitely, I've always felt that, the best present you could ever give anybody is your presence. Because no matter what someone's going through, no matter what they've experienced, um, sometimes it's better when there's few words and just like listening and just being present. And, there's a lot of times when we might meet people and we don't know what they're going through, but just show up and just be there can make all the difference, because they know that someone cares, that they're not alone. That, okay, like I matter, what I'm going through matters. Um, what are some ways that men can, like you're talking about coaches and,
Yeah.
like different newspaper and what are ways men can step up and be a healthy role model for kids growing up without a father figure? For those that are like, I don't know if I don't know how to, be or help someone in their life, like what would be something that you would suggest for them to do?
Be there. So it's like, if they're in a church, cool. Like, then, volunteer once a month in the Sunday school or the youth program. Like, if you're not around any young people, and it doesn't, and I'm not even talking about just like middle school, elementary, or like high school kids, but it's like kids in their 20s,
Hmm.
because who knows, like, we don't know anything in our 20s. You know what I mean?
Still need help.
And it was like, when I was in my 20s and I was working for the microbrewery, like I really looked up to our bosses, like my bosses, and like what they said carried a lot of weight with me. And so it's like, whether they know it or not, they impacted me. I messaged them actually just a couple of days ago, and I was like, hey, so like, remember when I left the beer business? Like, I went and made this. Go see it. um, So it's being there, you know, if you're athletic, cool, coach a team, or you know, go to a practice or volunteer or something like that. If like I did newspaper when I was in high school, and I remember Mr. Barnett was the, you know, the director of the newspaper, or what, or the editor, I don't know, or the sponsor, I don't know what it was called, but I remember he was so cool, right? And I felt like he wasn't just like a teacher and he had like this power over me, but I felt like it was almost like there was like this peer feeling because he wanted me to be successful in what I was doing. And that was just for like a year or two. And then, you know, moved on. And so I think it's literally, and I don't think he did anything necessarily special. He just invested in me, and I feel like he leveled with me.
Mm,
And so I felt respected, I felt empowered, and I felt confident in what I was doing. And I think it's like literally as simple as just being there. And there's tons of great organizations like the
yeah.
Boys and Girls Club. You know, I was in Boy Scouts, and I know a lot of people are still in Boy Scouts, and, you know, for females, Girl Scouts. But just having people who are like, I care.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't necessarily have to have a reason to care. I just care. And I want you to know that someone does care about you.
Yeah. And I like that investment, like just investing your time, because that means so much. Whether you're just like, I mean, you could just be going out and shooting hoops with a bunch of kids and
Yeah.
spending time, like, you know, just being there. Yeah, I like that. What are some of the greatest lessons that your father taught you and that you want to emulate in your own life?
I think there was a time when I feel like my family was like, I mean, we were like the definition of like middle class. And my dad had a good job. He was, I think he was like the vice president of operations for like a pretty good um like a convenience store chain. And so they had like a bunch of stores. But I remember they got bought out. And so it's always tricky whenever your company gets bought out by another company. And I remember he stayed on for a little while, and then ultimately the job ended. And I remember, and I can't remember exactly how old I was. I think I was in like high school at some point, or maybe a little bit younger. But I remember looking out the kitchen window, and normally he would be at work at this time because it was probably like summertime. Um, and he had the newspaper out, and he's making calls, like trying to find a job. I never heard him complain. I'm sure, you know, and I'm sure like, you know, he vented or had conversations with my mom, but like I never saw it. If it affected like any of our finances, like it never, you know, I never saw it.
Mhm.
Um, and what I took from that was, here's a guy who's like, he's going to provide for his family. And I thought that was really something because, um, you know, that was, it's not just his role as the man, but that was something that he took on. And that was part of the dynamic of our family, is he was a big provider in that. And he just did what he had to do. And, you know, I take that, and it's kind of one of my mottos in a lot of what I do. And in making this film was like, I set out to make a feature. I didn't know what to do. There were so many things I went through in this process. Like, huh?
Mhm.
But I was like, hey, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to figure it out. I'm going to do what I have to do. And I think that's like what my dad did at that time. You know, he didn't complain. He didn't go crazy. You know, he sat outside, looked through the paper, called his contacts, did what he had to do, you know, to provide for his family, and find the next gig. And that was a position that he was in. And that's a story that really stood out. I never talked to him about it,
Mhm.
you know. Um, and you know, if obviously if I could go back in time, right? But you know, if I could, I probably would have had to try to have more conversations like that with him, where we kind of peel back like the facade and be like, you know, like, how'd that make you feel? Like, what went through your head? You know, and it was like, you know, I would have loved to have heard that thought process. Like,
Mhm.
you know, was he mad? Was he sad? Was he embarrassed? Like, I don't know, you know. Um, but that was a big story that stood out from him. Um, yeah, and he was really fiery. So like he was a coach too. Like he would coach a lot of our teams, but like he was like real particular. Maybe that's where I get some of my stuff from too. But I remember if you didn't do it a certain way, he would get on you. He was an intense coach. Uh, and it was definitely intense when you're like in little league, but like I appreciate it because at the end of the day, I think that people do want to do things right.
Mhm.
Um, and it's okay to be, it's okay to be a little bit intense, maybe smooth the delivery a little bit. But yeah, that's the big story. That's the probably the biggest story that I've been thinking of lately. Which has been really interesting as I've been doing press for the movie. People have asked like these kinds of questions, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I haven't thought about a lot of these things in years. I'm super bad about reflecting sometimes, and I just get caught kind of in the here and the now. And so kind of rewinding 20 years is pretty interesting. And then also rewinding just 4 years ago to making the movie is like, oh my gosh, like there's things that I didn't even notice then that I notice now.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of want to touch on something that you had kind of said earlier about like, like showing emotion and just like, oh no, that's a weakness. And I think, especially in society, they've kind of like, I feel like put guys in boxes where it's like you have to suppress these emotions and you can't show these emotions and you can't be like, like emotional, and you have to be tough and like be like a man. And I've noticed that has just caused this kind of like ripple effect of it. Then not only does it, by stifling men's emotions, does it not help them? And then, like they gets bottled up. And that's why, like, I think sometimes we have combustible emotions that come from men. But then when women who are very emotional, then, display those emotions, oh, she's so emotional. Oh, like, and then it becomes this bad thing. And so all around there's such negative connotation, and it just isn't helping anybody. And then these same
Yeah.
people go on to have kids, and it's like, no, oh no, like calm down, like, oh, that's too much emotions. And I mean, we've really kind of done a good job at setting ourselves up for failure and hurt because we're not really allowing us to use the emotions that God gave us to
Mm-hmm.
use. I mean, like, how do you feel about that? Like, what would be your, I guess, advice to men that are thinking, this is how I was raised, or this is how, I saw it emulate, I need to stifle these emotions. Like, what's your thought on that?
I'm very grateful, and my advice is not to become an actor, but I'm very grateful that I did get into acting because part of the job is assessing those emotions and accessing them. And it allowed me to access things inside of me that normally I'd push really far down. And for me, anger is very easy for me, right? And because that's something that I can access really easy, because looking back, what I did was when I would feel like sadness or embarrassment or like feeling like I wasn't getting what I wanted or worked for or deserved, then I didn't want to show that. And so I would come out with anger, right? And you talk about combustible. Yeah, right. So when I really got into acting, it was like, I've got to like learn how to access these feelings of sadness and sorrow and regret. And it made me a more full person to feel these things. And because if you shut them off and if you try to shove them down, you can do that. And you will start building, laying some concrete over that opening. And it can be really hard to feel those things. And inevitably, as human beings, we have to feel. We're just designed that way. And I think it's, for me, as I've gotten older, I'm so glad that I allow myself to feel things. On the flip side of that, it's like, you talked about like women, like they cry and they go and they're like, oh, don't feel that too much. And then like, and there probably is a point where it's like too much, right? Like, it's like, there is like a happy middle of like, we need to feel these emotions, but we also have to ask, why am I feeling this emotion?
Mhm.
what's it coming from, right? And usually if you're really like angry about something and you start digging deep, it's not anger that's actually the root of that, right? That's just kind of the manifestation of it. And so, I mean, I think everyone should go to therapy personally. I think if you don't have somebody to talk to, like you're making life way harder than it is. You know what I mean? And it's like, and it's cool. Like, hey, listen, you know, we've got a very open marriage. We talk about our emotions and our feelings with our spouse. I'm like, that's cool. You still need a therapist, right? You need a spot where someone can just like backboard these things, because, you know, we only can see things kind of with our blinders on, and to have that kind of unbiased perspective. But it's just vulnerability, I think, is so powerful, because vulnerability allows you to relate to me. Um, you know, I look at one positive of my father passing is I've been through that. So when other people go through that, I know what they're dealing with, and every circumstance is different. I know what they're dealing with, but I know that, like, sometimes the best is just to sit with them and be like, hey, I want you to know I love you, and I know there's nothing I can do for you, and that's okay. And it's going to hurt, and that's okay. And you're going to be sad, and that's okay. Right. And it's not going to go away, and that's okay. Right. And to have someone say that versus being like, it'll get better. Well, that's the stupid thing to say.
Or time heals, time will
You
heal.
know, it's like over time it'll get better. And it's like, no, like, I still miss my dad.
Mm-hmm.
There are times I'll be driving, I'm like, I wish I could call him, you know. And as time, that feeling, you know, isn't as great or as raw, but it's like, don't diminish someone's feelings or experience. I was like, what that's coming from is a lack of experience, or a lack of being in touch with themselves. So I have no idea how I answered your question, but I think it's like, we just have to like feel.
Yeah.
Just it's okay to feel, and stop worrying about being macho, and stop worrying about being cool, and because, you know, we love celebrities, right? Like, our culture loves celebrities. It's true. Like, go to the grocery store and look at the tabloids. Like, everyone looks at it. You know, oh, what did Sandra Bullock do? What did Chris Pratt do? We love celebrities, and the ones that we usually resonate with the most are the ones that have those moments of realness, where they're like, you know what, this is something I struggle with, or hey, I struggle with mental health, or it's like, hey, I attempted suicide 10 years ago, or you know, hey, like, I had a miscarriage, and it's like, oh, these are real people, and it's like, I'm not alone in this, because chances are there's a lot of people on this earth. We're not alone. Whatever you've done, someone else has done it. There's probably a lot of people, and like, there's a tribe for that.
Nah, no, I like everything that you said. You know, therapy, oh my gosh, this would be a much better place if everybody went to therapy. I'm minored in psychology. You know, I go to therapy. But also, you know, they always say, you know, in psychology and therapy that you, in order to heal, you have to go through the missions. Like you that's part of healing. And so, you know, don't stay float down. It doesn't, it actually, it causes damage. It doesn't help you. So yeah, I absolutely agree with everything that you just said. How did Tobin Bell get involved in the film?
um, First of all, Tobin is amazing. I mean, not just as an actor. I mean, he's just an insane craftsman at his job, but just, I just think he's got such a beautiful soul. So I got a casting director, Matthew Seafick, which wasn't a part of the original plan. But as we were planning this feature, I was like, okay, this is going to be, there's going to be a lot more to this than I thought. And I was like, maybe I can get some help on the casting side. So Matt Seafick came along, and we're like, you know what, let's take a shot. Let's go out to some actors in LA for this essentially, you know, title role. And and see if there's any interest, because this was not a money gig.
Mhm.
You know, whoever is going to do this is going to do it because they believed in the story. They could make way more money doing a day on Criminal Minds.
Mhm.
And we got this list back of people who might be interested kind of in the parameters we were working with. And Tobin was on that list. And I was like, interesting. And because obviously we know him as Jigsaw from the Saw. I mean, he's been $1 billion horror franchise.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay. So I watched some of his stuff, and I was like, his voice just has this gravitas. And I was like, you look at him, and he looks like he's lived a life. His face is weathered. He's walked this earth. You look at him, and you're like, you've lived. I was like, Tobin's at the top of our list. So we kind of went back and forth, and then there was a meeting, and I met with him at this like cafe, and I knew what this meeting was. I knew it wasn't like, do I think that Tobin's right to play this role? I knew it wasn't that. I knew it was, is Tobin going to trust me enough to come play with me and do this role? And over that, I think it was like a couple hours, we had a meal. We just kind of talked as people. We talked about the story, how it resonated with him. And, you know, ultimately, was he going to trust me as a first time director who no one knows who I am? I'm also acting opposite him in the picture. It's a it's a two-hander film. Like, it's me and him, you know, is he going to trust me there? And is he going to come, you know, for the love of the story? And ultimately, whatever it was, he did trust me. And he made everything better every step of the way. And whenever he asked so many questions, and he was like, hey, why is this like this? Or should this be like this? Why is this like this? And so it was like, he wanted it to be as good as it could. He didn't just show up and say the lines or say kind of the lines. Like, no, like, he's a craftsman. He's a wonderful actor, wonderful human being. Everyone loved him on set. He's like such a charismatic, like, outgoing individual. But I remember the first day we were shooting, we had already been shooting for 3 or 4 days, and then Tobin arrives, and we're doing this scene where we're like digging this ditch pretty much. And I was like, hey, Tobin, are you comfortable with a pickaxe? And he was like, oh yeah, give it to me. And so he's like going to town on this like ditch with this with a pickaxe and like with a shovel, and he's just like, and he's working hard. And it's like hot. It's like 90 some degrees, humid in the south. Gnats are flying all over, and he was going all in. And it just really like helped to set the tone even more, because you can't help, like, when Tobin's on set, you're just, you know, he's a presence.
Mhm.
And everyone just respects him for his body of work and what he's known for. But yeah, I can't speak highly enough about him. And we had this this joke on set of I think he makes my character a sandwich one day, and because I'm like, you know, my stomach's growling, I'm like, make me a sandwich. And he does, because, you know, I have a gun and holding him hostage. And then I'm like, make me another. And we were kind of joking around while we were doing that, and I'm like, yeah, man, we could have, like, you know, like Billy, his character's name, like Billy's Diner, you know. And he's like, everything comes with a pickle. So, and this was in 2018. We were joking around about this, and literally he texted me like a few days ago, and he's like, the sequel, Billy's Diner, everything comes with a pickle. And
Oh,
um, and that's how present and thoughtful he is. And I really like, I truly, on a personal level, like, I value my relationship with him, because he embodied these characters, or these traits that I put into this story, in this father-son story.
wow. How can we get more info on the film?
Yeah, probably the best places are going to be A Father's Legacy has an Instagram, they have a Facebook page. And then I'm living in the 90s myself. All I have is a website. I'm jasonmack.com, and I'll definitely be posting updates on when and how it's available. I know in July, I think late July, it's going to be on pretty much all the platforms and stuff like that. So yeah,
All right. And what's next for you?
that's the golden question right there. I don't know exactly what's next. I'm reading some scripts. I'm developing my own scripts. I'm looking at playing in some different genres and just really figuring out what what do I want to lend my voice to? What is my voice like? What do I have to say? And as long as this process took for this film, I've learned that it can't be a flash in the pan. It's got to be something that's rooted in something I really believe in and am passionate about. And so that's trying to figure that out.
Oh, that's great. Jason, it's been so fun having you on for this episode. And I just want to remind all of my viewers and my listeners to live each day with purpose, making a difference one day, one life at a time. And again, Jason, thank you. And until next time.